Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. 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 Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. I want to thank you today for your time and attention. I really, really wanted us to continue to go into our books, Moving Beyond Broke and also Live Nourished. But in light of some of the things that have happened in recent days, I did want to share some of my thoughts and share some of my connections and experiences, and also just to give us some reminders about staying free in this particular hour. All right, let's go ahead and check our comment section here. Let's go ahead and do that. And our comments are limited to subscribers only because, unfortunately, everybody on the general internet doesn't know how to interact properly with people on the internet. We're going to start today with a meditation for Black women reading. I think this is a good place to start because we got some pretty intense things that we're going to talk about today. So let me go here first. And we've actually been moving through this pretty good. Today's Get Free Friday lesson: develop a version of a balanced life. Now, I like to use the term harmony versus balance. I feel like a lot of people are looking for balance. And if you're human having this human experience, you know, and probably have recognized by now that balance is an elusive thing, but harmony isn't. Harmony is when you have pieces of your life working together. They may not be at the same measure, right? But they are where they need to be, how they need to be operating, and those things work together. So I like to talk about harmony more so than balance, but we'll see what the writer has to say today. Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, had this to say in an interview: I think you have to be comfortable with perhaps not being perfect all the time. It is okay for us to have life that's a little bit messy. Not to burst your bubble, but the idea of work life balance is a myth. When it comes to balancing your life, there's always talk of mainly balancing work and home. For mothers, this includes parenting. I don't know why it wouldn't include parenting for fathers, but that's another story. However, your life is not split into two areas of care and existence. You're not just at work and then at home being a caregiver. You're out and about in the world with other parts of you that deserve to be nurtured, like your mental health and your social life. You're probably thinking, if having a work-life balance is not a real thing, then what is the other option? An imperfect life that is a little bit messy. Seriously. Now, you get to define your version of imperfect and messy. Ketanji Brown Jackson is correct in her quote. You're not always going to get it right at home or at work. So you have to get comfortable with being imperfect. And that applies to any other area of your life. If you find the idea of embracing being imperfect uncomfortable, Let's talk about it. For you, as a Black woman, or as a human being in general, allowing yourself to let go of perfectionism is probably hard. Your identity and your anxiety may be wrapped up in both. It doesn't serve you to be seen by your spouse, your partner, your children, your friends, or your coworker as someone who is always put together. It commodifies you. People start to label you, and they no longer see the human side of you. Because when you have real life moments where you come undone, you want to be seen as a human being. Don't participate in the ideologies that dehumanize you, which in this case is oftentimes disguised as perfectionism. Nonetheless, to develop your version of a harmonious life, you will have to identify the areas of your life you want to pour your energy into. Some areas of your life may require more energy than others. Then work through understanding that you may not get it right all the time, and that is okay. Take time to explore what version of a harmonious life would look like. What would your daily routines be? All right. And I'll tell you, once I shifted um, my attitude, once I shifted my perspective from trying to balance things to trying to harmonize things, it was a complete life shift for me. Um, and a good life shift. I haven't struggled anymore with things that get less attention or things that get more attention because I understand now that those things are harmonizing. The things that need my immediate attention, those are the things I pay attention to right away. And the things that don't need my immediate attention, I know where to place them until I can get to them. All right. So let's talk a little bit. I want to read, because it is National Poetry Month, I want to read one poem today. And I'm reading it from African American Poetry 250 Years of Song and Struggle. Now, in case you did not know, the editor for this is Mr. Kevin Young. Kevin Young used to direct the National Museum of African American History and Culture until most recently when he was put on leave. And then I think, don't quote me, but I think possibly he may no longer be with the museum at all, which is a huge loss to the museum and to us. But as I was reading through the first section of poetry, I've been going through one page at a time, looking at these new poets that I'm being introduced to, people who I did not know. This section of the poetry book, let me see, let me make sure I go to the beginning here. This section is entitled Bury Me in a Free Land. And this is all poetry between 1770 and 1899. So this particular poem really kind of sits right at the beginning of the foundations of America. And it was written by a woman by the name of Carrie Williams Clifford. And the poem is titled America. Now, it's very interesting because a lot of these poems are just simply titled America. So as I'm going through and reading, I'm getting all of these different pictures of how our early citizens, right, and even people who were not yet deemed citizens, saw America. And this poem really struck me. And so I wanted to share it with you because I was like, man, what has changed? What has changed? And this poem kind of made me just like stop and sit up because some of the same themes that she is expressing in this poem about America, you could drop this poem off in 2025. And I'm like, wow, that's a that makes me pause because again, this is at this point hundreds of years removed. So let's see what Carrie Williams Clifford had to say about America. America is not another name for opportunity to all her sons. Nay, bid me not be dumb. I will be heard. Christians, I come to plead with burning eloquence of truth, a brother's cause, I to demand forsooth. The manhood rights of which he is denied, too long your pretense have your acts belied. So she's even calling out the Christians hundreds of years ago. What has he done to merit your fierce hate? I charge you, speak the truth, for know his fate. Irrevocably is bound up with yours, for good or ill, as long as time endures. Torn from his native home by ruthless hands, for centuries he tilled your fruitful lands in shameful, base, degrading slavery. Your humble, patient, loyal vassal he, piling your coffers high with magic gold, himself the while like cattle bought and sold. When devastating war stalked through the land and dangers threatened you on every hand, these sons whose color you cannot forgive did freely shed their blood that you might live, a nation strong and great. And will you then continue to debase, degrade, contemn your loyal children while with smiling face you raise disloyal ones to power and place? Raising disloyal people to power and place. I wonder where we see that at. Is race or color crime for that this cause you draft against the Negro unjust laws? Is race or color sin that he should be for these things treated so outrageously? Oh, boastful white American, beware. It is the handiwork of God you dare thus to despise, and he will you repay with generous measure overflowing, yea, for all the good which in his life you wrought, for helpful deed or kindly loving thought, for every act of cruelty you've done, for every groan which you have from him wrung, for every infamy by him endured, he will you all repay, be thou assured. Not here alone, ere time shall cease to be, but likewise there through all eternity. Carrie Williams Clifford, America. So I'm just reading this and I'm like, what? You mean to tell me hundreds of years ago, people were drawing the same conclusions that we're drawing in 2025? That's not a good look at all. But I want us to understand that our people have been calling for justice and yearning to be free for a very long time. All right. Now, as I said, I was going to get into our other readings, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that have been going down, and I'm going to give some hopefully helpful directions. Okay. First thing that happened before the campus shooting that happened on yesterday, I believe on the Tuesday or Wednesday, North Carolina Central University students went out on their campus in a peaceful demonstration um, to bring to light and bring to attention of their school their horrific living conditions. All right, I'm not sure why this story is not getting more traction or not being picked up more, but I want to show you some of the images from this particular peaceful expression of their First Amendment rights. So these students went out on their campus. This is a HBCU campus, and it was 4 students and 1 faculty member. They were arrested on campus by campus law enforcement because they were holding a speak out about the conditions in their dorms. So they went out on campus and decided to speak out about the horrific conditions of their dorms, right? The goal was to bring attention to issues with student housing, black mold, roaches, rodents, constantly breaking down elevators, washers and dryers that didn't work, flooding in basements. Now, keep in mind, students pay for their dorm living. Okay. I was a college student at the campus that just had the school shooting. We'll talk about that in a moment. But students pay to live in these dorms, it's not a freebie. So, to expect proper living conditions while you are trying to go to school and get an education is reasonable to expect proper living conditions. Okay. Same thing was happening a couple years back at Howard University. Students were complaining about their living conditions, and we're going to rope that into this. Okay. Now, according to the student leaders, all of the arrestees were affiliated with the college. They were not outside agitators and all of this other stuff. They were students and faculty, current enrolled students and faculty. Okay. When they were doing that, the campus police came, and you will see from these stills that we're about to show you how these officers were treating campus students. They're slamming young people into glass. They are slamming them on the grounds. It is reported that one student was being punched repeatedly in the head while they were held on the ground on concrete. There was video of some of this, but that video has disappeared from online. And we know there's a lot of stuff happening online with live streams, especially on um, Facebook's platform. So just be mindful of that, to try to not do so much online streaming, but just make sure you record in your phone so you actually have a viable video before you start streaming online. That's just a tip. But I want you to take a look at these images, okay? There's an officer there literally picking the student up and hurling him toward glass, okay? Here's another one, okay? Here's another one, and another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Why do we have this excessive force being used against students who are exercising their First Amendment rights? Well, you have to realize that, number one, we are in a militarized state of policing right now. And not only are we in a militarized state of policing, but we're in a state of policing where the current felon in charge wants to provide more freedom for these kind of abuses to take place, and for police officers to have complete immunity for how they treat you, which is why people are urging you, don't go out there trying to do a physical protest. And I will read you something that was said here that I think is important. This is a person who was interacting on my post. She said, DJ JG said, these students need to post videos of their conditions like the children at Howard did and let it go viral online. In digital age, we can do better. Put the school on the defensive and let the world know what the conditions are. These schools are not acting right, so you have to outsmart them. Okay? Most of us at this point, the 92% and the 80%, we already know what time of day it is in this country. Okay? We didn't need those visuals to know, because we already told people, if you go out there putting your body on the line, that is what is going to happen. Some of these people are itching to do you harm. So you have to use other methods of protest. Protest does not always mean putting your body in harm's way. Okay. So I want us to think about that. The second thing, I went ahead and I put this up, and I'm going to share it. That's why I'm sharing it here. And that is police militarization and helping people to understand what is going on. So, a couple of things you need to know. The current state of police militarization. Number one, it's been a widespread adoption of it. It wasn't as wide until after 2020, but it has increased. What does that mean? That means military style equipment and tactics are being more and more increasingly used with common law enforcement. This is including the use of armored vehicles, assault rifles, and military style training for the officers, many of whom have been trained by Israeli armed forces. Okay. There's been increased funding for this kind of thing. Federal programs like the 1033 program provided billions of dollars to local police departments, enabling them to acquire surplus military equipment. And some police departments are now utilizing Tesla trucks. Okay. Critics are arguing that this militarization can lead to an increased use of unnecessary force, which we just saw, particularly in interactions with marginalized communities and during protests, which we just saw. All right. So if you are going to go out there, make sure you are documenting everything. Some people are recommending at this point that many of us purchase a body cam. You can actually get a body cam now for about $20. If you're going to engage in this kind of thing and you just insist on going out, make sure you have a way to document for yourself what is happening in real time. Okay. So, what is the impact on this? The impact on citizens' rights is a disproportionate impact on marginalized groups. This is eroding the public trust and the violation of citizens' rights. Well, here's the problem. When I started going in and looking up what can be done if your rights are violated, right? They talked about things that you could do. First of all, of course, number one, document everything. Record the date, the time, location, details about the incident, try to get officers' names, that kind of thing. Second thing, seek legal counsel. Third, and this is where the problem comes, file a complaint. Based on the nature of the violation, you may need to file a complaint with the relevant government agency or authority. Well, guess what has happened in less than 100 days? All of the organizations that I looked at that you would need to file a complaint with, guess what? Doge has either defunded them or they have been gutted of actual human resources, meaning the people have been laid off and fired, or they have been shut down, claiming that these departments are DEI. So all of the people that you would actually file complaints to, those offices are either shuttered or they're woefully understaffed. Okay. So I want people again to understand the current conditions of what we have going on in this country. We have a government that is complicit in making sure that you cannot get your voice heard when it comes to your human rights and when it comes to your civil rights. That is what's happening in our country right now. This is why we need people to think smarter and not harder. You don't want to be putting your body on the line right now in a system that is not going to consider your civil rights and your human rights. And how do we know this? Well, they're already disappearing people without due process and sending them to El Salvador. All right. Most of us know the case about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Right now, we already know. Most of us, we've been paying attention, right? He was sent over there without due process, and they're acting as if they cannot bring him back. You do not want to be in a situation where our government is doing things against your human rights and acting like they cannot bring you back. Our government is literally right now in the process of either, some people say defying, some people say ignoring, both. They're ignoring and defying the Supreme Court, not just the lower courts, the Supreme Court. So again, you do not want to be putting your body on the line in this current situation of what we have going on here in the United States. You don't want to do it. Okay? So think smarter, think harder, think about resisting in ways that doesn't involve you putting your body in unnecessary harm's way. Okay? I hope everybody heard that. Next, let's get to what happened on yesterday. I am a graduate of Florida State University. Um, I lived in Tallahassee from the time I enrolled in college there in 1995 until 2011. So I was a part of community in Tallahassee um, for what? Do the math. 16 years. All right. People would say close to 2 decades. So I know the community very well. Um, I know the police chief there. I know the assistant police chief, who is, um, both of them are people of integrity. That's one thing I can say about the current leadership in Tallahassee. I can't speak to all of it. They have people of integrity in charge of the police department. So I do feel confident that what happened is going to be resolved in a way where justice is actually done and justice is actually served um, for the people, for the people of Tallahassee. The other thing is, I know the campus very well. Again, I was a student there. I used to preach right outside of the student union, open air preaching. Yeah. I used to preach in Landis Green, where people were sitting outside yesterday and enjoying the sun and enjoying the beauty when all of this went down and they left all of their you could just see all of the stuff that was everywhere, where people just got up and ran and took off. They left everything. The third thing is, one of my godchildren attends Florida State right now. And when I heard that there had been, or there was, an active shooter on the campus, there's only one other time I felt the blood in my body go cold in my veins. And that was when there was a Klansman slash police officer standing on one side of my car door and warning me about taking my husband off somewhere and disappearing him during a traffic stop. That was in Virginia. That was the only other time I felt that. But this time I felt like the literal blood in my body had just gone cold, and like I could feel the coldness come over me. I texted my godson and I asked, where was he? Was he on campus? There's been a school shooting, stay safe. There's been a shooting on campus, stay safe. And a few minutes after that, he texted me back and said he had gotten the alarm to not go on campus. And so at that moment, I breathed a sigh of relief. But I'm going to tell you, that was a moment for me that just made me completely freeze up. And it was like time stood still, because he's supposed to graduate this year. And this is 1 week before college semester ends. And I thought about all of the parents who've gotten their children to a certain place in life, and then they're struck with this kind of news of their child's life being ended. So all of that was like running through my head yesterday. And even after I got the news that he was okay and he hadn't gone on campus, it took me, I had to go take a nap. I had to go take a nap because I was like, my mind was everywhere. And it was like the adrenaline in my body was just, it had to take time to like calm down, settle down. I did some deep breathing. I turned off stuff. I kind of just turned off social media. If you'll notice, there's hours where I'm not saying anything on social media, because I was like, I need to decompress, and I need to go lay down and take a nap. And that's what I did. Um, and so what I want to say about the shooting that occurred We are finding out things, and as we find out more information, I will continue to put things up on Black Table Talk. Okay. One, and again, like I said, I know a lot of the people who are going to be dealing with this for the next probably years now. Um, we know that this boy, this young man, he's not a boy. We know that this young man was a part of the sheriff's program that is intended to bridge the gap between young people and their understanding of law enforcement. I know some people that are part of that program. I know some of the people that do like the mentorship talks and everything within that program. This is devastating to them that you had somebody in this program that was designed to foster a better relationship between officers and the community and young people, and that this person would come out of that. That's devastating. Where there are people who are trying to do things like community policing, which Tallahassee is actually working, their programs are designed for that, to see that this would come out of that. We do know now that the shooter was a registered Republican. We know that he was a pro-Trumper. We also know that he was asked to leave the political club that was on campus because, as the leader of the political club said, his views went beyond Republicanism. His views went beyond even conservatism. Now, my question would be for them, if you started recognizing that, why didn't you report it? Because that's the stuff, when people go back and say, well, how did we miss this or how do we not see this? It's those little things. If he was a part of a political club and you saw that his views went way beyond Republicanism, why didn't you report it? Why didn't you alert somebody? The leader of the political club said that it had gotten to the point where he was making so many people uncomfortable that other people stopped coming to the club because he was there. Red flag. Red flag. All right. So we do know those things. We also know that his stepmother is a sheriff's deputy for Tallahassee. We know that he used the retired handgun of the stepmother. It wasn't her in use service weapon, but it was her retired one. And as the police chief explained, that sometimes they allow people to purchase their own service weapon when they retire that service weapon. So that is the weapon he used. And he also had a shotgun. What else do we know? Um, we know that on his social media, he has a scripture posted sort of describing doing war against your enemies and all of that. And again, this is something that we've been talking about on my Black Table Talk page, which is making sure that you're paying attention to who's following you on your page. And this week I had to expel, now I'm going on about 500 white supremacist, racist pages from Black Table Talk. I had to go in, look at profiles, recognize that these are white supremacists that are trying to embed themselves in my page and follow me. And I had to hit not only block, but block any other pages they might create. So I have 2 posts up about showing people how can you identify these pages so that you don't just have people following you and trying to surveil you for nefarious reasons. Okay. And one of the things that we talked about and people shared was that oftentimes when you go to these pages, they usually have some kind of scripture up, or they have a cross, or they say that they're a Christ follower. But then when you start looking at the number of things on their pages that have nothing to do with Christ, that are actually anti-human, or they're anti-woman, or they're anti-diversity, or they just flat out don't like Black people, or there's, posts with the N-word in full regalia. But then you go back up to their bio, it says, something about God or something about Jesus, or they'll have a scripture verse there. And so people are saying, now, if I go to your page and I see scripture in your description, that even is becoming a red flag to people. And I think Christians ought to be concerned on this Good Friday that if you have scripture in your bio, it is now seen as a red flag to a lot of people that there might be something problematic with you. That should concern people who are believers. Okay. So I posted those things again on that post about the school shooting. The other thing I mentioned about the school shooting, as Florida State's campus has grown, it takes up several several blocks. It's several square miles and it's really spread out. And even when I was there as a student, I noticed that Florida State doesn't have a lot of security in terms of getting into the campus. There's only one main gate at one main intersection, um, and it's more like a stop, and the gate goes up and the gate goes down. But when I was there, even a few years back, and I drove through the campus, there was no security checkpoints. There was no security checkpoints. There was no security guard saying, "Hey, what are you on campus for? Can I see an ID?" None of that. And as I said, Florida State's campus has several open spaces all around it where people can just drive into the campus, park, and go right on into that main area. The student union is right off of the major thoroughfare in Tallahassee. At this point, they're probably going to consider either putting up some sort of security gate or something there, or a guard at least at the center in the heart of student life, which is the student union, which is where he started shooting. Okay. And so that those things kind of went through my head as I was thinking about what happened. Now, of course, there's going to be lots of fallout about him being a student. He was a current student, but there was nothing really, as they said, there was nothing really on the radar for him except his political views. As the police chief said, he was a part of their programming for young people to connect with law enforcement. So it would not have been a surprise that he had access to guns. The other thing I want to point out is that if you remember the Parkland shooting, and I'm sure Pastor Ben is on here, he could probably speak to that when he comes on. If you remember the Parkland shooter down in Fort Lauderdale, that shooter had gone up to Tallahassee, had trained with militia in Tallahassee, because Tallahassee does have active Klansmen. I used to live about 20 minutes away from a town that had active Klansmen that met every weekend at the library. Okay. Active Klansmen there that do hold militia type gatherings. That student from Fort Lauderdale had gone to one of those gatherings. He had been given a weapon, and then he came back down to Fort Lauderdale and he committed the Parkland shooting. Okay. So you got to ask yourself, what is brewing and what is growing in Tallahassee that needs to be given more attention when it comes to radicalizing young people? Okay. We don't know yet again if he was a part of any kind of militia group yet, but what we do know is the shooter that shot up Parkland was trained in Tallahassee by a militia group. Okay. The other interesting thing is that some of the children that had survived Parkland were at Florida State and just experienced the campus shooting. They were in the student union when the campus shooting happened. And one of those students were interviewed and said, "I'm still dealing with Parkland. And now here I am again in college dealing with another shooting. So I want you to think about that. That student went through Parkland, graduated, made it through the horror of that, because that was horrific, because those police officers stayed outside. They get to college, they think they can take a breather. I can exhale a little bit. And now another shooting. America has got to make a decision on whether we actually want people, children, young people, to grow up in a better world than what we are currently leaving them with. Yeah. So on this Good Friday, I want you to think about those things. And then also note that tomorrow is the anniversary of, and again, that's why I said more information is coming out, but tomorrow is the anniversary of the Oklahoma bombing. So was this tied to, commemoration or remembering some sort of terrorist act in America? We don't know yet, but it's a lot to, it's a lot to consider, and it's a lot to think about. So like I said, I would have loved to talk about my books today, but this was on the books today. Stephanie says, we have to use discernment and wisdom. Absolutely. Absolutely. Last week, the Spirit of God prompted us. He said, don't do a message. I want you to pray for the nation, and I want you to sing. I want you to pray for the nation. I want you to sing. I want you to pray about people being deceived and for them not to be deceived. I want you to pray against people who are, not against, but pray for people who are depressed. Pray for that. And that's what we did. And now here we are with this week. So I encourage you, look around you, pay attention, stay alert, continue to resist tyranny, because that's what we are currently under as a nation. There's no getting around that. We are under some tyranny. If you are Black, if you are Indigenous, if you are a person of color, if you are someone whose citizenship could be in question, yeah, pay attention. And I'm going to give you my last thoughts about that. When I looked at what had happened with the Albrego gentleman, he's from there. He's out of Maryland, rather. He was brought here legally, given a status to keep him safe. Shout out to our governor, shout out to our representatives who said, we are not going to let this go down like this. We are actually going to go and check on him. People keep asking me, why am I in the state of Maryland? Why am I living in Maryland? And why am I not living in Florida? Because I cannot guarantee that if I was in Florida, that would have been the response. Okay? So shout out to Maryland, the free state, with representatives who will fight for you and go to bat for you when you've been carried off somewhere. Shout out to Maryland. I'm going to keep being here because, yeah, the way my representatives respond should tell you all you need to know about why I'm in Maryland and why I'm not in Florida. You have been praying about young people, gates, assignments, and community. Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are good prayer points, and we have to continue to keep it up. I want to share with you some statements, because what I'm seeing is I'm seeing some Black people not put two and two together. We have a lot of Black people who keep saying that what's happening to people like Kilmar is not our business. It absolutely is our business, because again, these people don't see us as citizens. So they will start with people who they have criminalized, but don't think for 1 minute that this can't happen to you. So yes, it is our business. It is our business, because when you see this happen and you don't respond and point out the inhumanity and dehumanization that is happening, they get comfortable and it normalizes what they're doing. And we should never normalize criminalization and dehumanization of people, whether they look like us or not. So, no, we're not going to normalize it. And we're not going to allow it to be normalized in front of us and say it's not our business. Now, how we respond to it, okay, how we respond to what is happening may be different than other people because of safety issues and reasons. But to say it's not our business is just simply not true. I want to read this last piece before I go into conversation today. Jamar Tisby, who is a theologian, said this: they call them criminals so they don't have to call them human. I've seen what happens when we forget the image of God that lives even behind bars. What's happening in El Salvador is a warning, and it is a mirror for you to look in. When we excuse cruelty with labels, we lose our souls in the process. When we excuse cruelty with labels, we lose our souls in the process. As we're talking about Good Friday and thinking of Good Friday, Jesus was criminalized. Jesus was labeled a criminal. In case you didn't know your Bible, I'm just saying. Jesus was labeled a criminal. And when they labeled him a criminal, they began to justify their dehumanization and abuse of him. Mhm. But this isn't just about the people who use the labels. It's about us. What kind of people will we be, and what kind of faith do we claim? Too often, the word criminal is used as a shortcut to justify cruelty. Hundreds of migrants who don't have any criminal record are without due process being locked up in brutal conditions. They are being disappeared from their communities. And if you think that they won't do that to Black people, you're fooling yourself. And they're doing it because someone called them criminals without any evidence. Faith demands that we see the humanity of people before we see their label, and we act accordingly. I want to challenge you to not just see somebody as a label, but to see them as the human being that they are. You don't have to agree with people to see them as human beings. Let me say that again. You don't have to agree with people to see them as human beings. There are some people, I don't agree with them politically, but I see them as a human being. There are some people, I don't agree with their personal choices, but I see them as a human being. When you stop seeing people as a human being, even the felon in chief, we call him the felon in chief because we don't want to say his name. I don't agree with most of everything he's done, but I still see that he's a human being. Now, he's a human being full of evil and hatred for other people, but he's still a human being. All right. So think about these things. I hope I've given you enough to think about. Check out our page, Black Table Talk. Follow the page, subscribe here, follow that page, subscribe here, and we'll keep this conversation going. All right, Pastor Ben, I want to try to bring you on. I've got some time, so we will go a little bit past 12 just to make sure. All right, so I have sent the link. Let me know if you can hop on while Pastor Ben is joining us. I'm going to read us one more poem. This poem is coming from Marie Evans, and it's coming out of the book The Black Poets. It's called Where Have You Gone? Where have you gone with your confident walk, with your crooked smile? Why did you leave me when you took your laughter and departed? Are you aware that with you went the sun, all light, and what few stars there were? Where have you gone with your confident walk, your crooked smile, the rent money in one pocket, and my heart in another? Where have you gone? All right. Good morning. I don't see you yet. There you go. Good, good, good. I know you're probably working on site. What's going on? Okay. Okay.
Backing up a bit.
Got you. Okay.
Going to these quote unquote illegal.
Hmm.
This
Right. It's not.
let me do this one because that one.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Listen, you know how they start with us and then they go to
Hmm.
everybody else.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do they get rid of black people? You can't just say, okay, y'all gotta go. So what do? Start calling you criminals, pick you up off the
Hmm.
street, and ship you to El Salvador because they're not going to send you to Africa.
Right. Say it again for them, Pastor.
Pick you up and send you to El Salvador because they ain't going to send you to Africa, where they got our ancestors from. They're not going to do that
Right.
because we were strengthened. We were strengthened Africa, and they know that.
Hmm.
So they're not going to send us there. They will send our people to El Salvador to prison camp for us to suffer. Doing they're all they're doing is just laying the food, laying it, making it easy for it.
And here's the reality.
That's what they're doing.
And here's the reality. Some of them want to. Some of them want to get rid of us. We understand that. We're perfectly clear
Mm-hmm.
on that. But you have a
Mm-hmm.
group of people who recognize that black people are like the jewels in the crown. If you remove the jewels in the crown, your crown is not much of anything. So you have a faction of people that recognize
Right.
that if you remove the jewels in the crown, you're gonna be in trouble. You have that
Mm-hmm.
faction of people. The other faction of people realize if you do what you think you're going to do to black people, there will be such a swift divine retribution upon this nation,
Mm-hmm.
that even if black people cried for your mercy, there would be none.
It ain't happening. Mm-mm.
So there's a faction of people that realize that. There's a faction of people that realize
Mm-hmm.
that the reason why this nation has not gone under for its immense wickedness, let's be clear, is because
Mm-hmm.
there are black people still here.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at moral decay is what ends a nation. Moral decay.
Mm-hmm.
Moral decay is what ends a nation. Go look in history. And I mean, Rome, unparalleled military, but it's not here anymore. It's not here anymore. Not the way it was. Moral decay. And so when people look at America, they see America's moral decay, but they also see that there's a group of people in America that aren't like that. Or in Kendrick Lamar's words, they not like us.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've already discussed, and we're going to keep saying it, should this nation be taken over, should this nation be invaded, they coming for the boasters.
Mm-hmm.
That's who they're coming for. They're coming for the boasters. What did China tell y'all? China said, we do not care. And I want us to understand that that doesn't just apply to trade. Let's be clear. That doesn't just apply to trade. If they ever step foot on this ground in an invasion, just understand that's going to be their same attitude. We do not care.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I need to brush up on my Mandarin. Because I'm like, the United States, we playing. We playing with some fire. We playing
Mm-hmm.
with fire. We playing with fire.
Mm-hmm.
Our president
Listen.
is playing Connect Four, and they are playing chess.
Mm-hmm.
We not even playing checkers. He playing Connect Four, and they're playing chess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I
And,
don't want to
and,
take your time to speak from me.
we've spoken on these two nations, China and Russia. We've been speaking on them for years now.
Mm-hmm.
And once America froze Russia's assets and China backed them, that was it. That's an alliance. That's what you call an alliance. See, they both are training South Africa and
Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, our government has adopted what they call um, an isolationist policy. So while they're building alliances around the world, you know, they're putting money into Africa's infrastructure. They're training their young people
mm-hmm,
in military tactics. Our country is saying, let's pull back from collaboration. Let's isolate ourselves. And
mm-hmm,
history tells us how that works out. History already
yeah,
tells us how that works out. But we have people wanting to repeat the worst parts of history, not learn from
mm-hmm,
them, but they want to repeat the worst parts of history. Now, tell me your thoughts
big,
on, if you wouldn't mind, tell me your thoughts on the Parkland shooting and the connection with students who are now at Florida State who just experienced yesterday's shooting.
Listen, that's got to be terrible. It's got to be. You've actually lived through it once, and now here it is again.
Hmm.
It came to your neighborhood, your high school. Now it's at your college. But let's point something else out. The majority of these mass shooters, white.
Hmm.
The majority of them have ties to what? White supremacists and white nationalists. This man talking about sending criminals, homegrown criminals, to El Salvador, but he ain't gonna send the worst ones because the worst and biggest homegrown criminals are white supremacists. Let's be clear and straight on that. In fact, those that attacked the Capitol, he pardoned them. Those were terrorists.
Yeah, you're
No
right.
matter how you look at it, they were terrorists. But they supported him, so he's gonna forgive.
Uh-oh, it's freezing.
And then they made him exempt from accountability. So now he's thumbing his nose up at him and say, "Okay, I don't care what
I
y'all
just
said.
looked up.
I'm gonna do what I
I
want
just
to do."
looked up because I want to give people actual data. Okay. Mass shootings in the US by shooters, race, and ethnicity as of September 2024. And since the year has started, there have been 61 shootings since the year has started. Between 1982 and September 2024, 82 of the 151 mass shootings in the United States, 82 of the 151 mass shootings in the United States were carried out by white shooters. By comparison, the perpetrator was African American in 26 mass shootings and Latino in 12. When calculated as percentages, this amounts to 54% are carried out by white shooters, 17% by Black, and 8% by Latino, respectively. Now, remember, we had a whole conversation about how they changed the definition of a mass shooting to
Mm-hmm.
4 people or more,
Mm-hmm.
not including the shooter who was shot. Okay? So I want you to think about that. 54% of mass shootings are carried out
Mm-hmm.
by white shooters, male or female, but the majority male. Now, clearly, that is not proportional, right, to the number of white people in the country, or it is about proportional to the number of white people in the country. Why is there no nationwide initiative and plan to care for the health, the mentality of white people around mass shootings? Why isn't there a national campaign? Why isn't there a school campaign to where you're addressing these obviously mental concerns that would lead people down this way? Why? Where are the national programs? Didn't we have a DARE
Well,
program?
listen.
Didn't we have a Just Say
Well,
No
well,
to Drugs program? Didn't we have a War on Drugs program? So where's the program for this? If we're seeing it as a epidemic, where is the government backing to say we've got to help these white people? We've got to help these young white people with whatever their mindset is that's leading them down this road. Where is the government program for that? Why aren't we funding it? Why aren't we funding studies around it? Oh, that's right.
here's the thing. They're white. If they did that, that would cause attention to a problem. That's why you got to keep talking about it and pushing it. That's why you got to do things to demoralize or dehumanize other people. When you're superior, when you're the best at something, you don't have to about it. I mean, yeah, we know we got Muhammad Ali. That was his thing, though. That's what he did. He had a big mouth. He did a lot of rhymes, and that was a part of who he was. That's what he did.
Now I want to
That's what he
now
did.
I want you to pay attention to this, right? So I just typed in programs for mass shooting. Programs addressing mass shootings focus on prevention, response, support for victims and communities, training for law enforcement and first responders, crisis intervention and threat assessments in schools, and mental health support for victims and survivors. Not one of those things says deal with the shooter. I just want us to be aware that everything is focused on the results of what the shooter did. But these programs don't focus on actual shooter mental health. It
Hmm.
said mental health support for victims and survivors. What happened to the mental health support for the person who's leaning in the direction of doing violence? Where is their program? Where is their crisis intervention program? School based threat assessment programs, helping schools identify and intervene with students exhibiting dangerous behaviors. That's where all of your money need to go. Threat assessment programs, mental health assessment programs. That's it. And not saying that these other things are not important, but you're not getting to the root of the problem. You're throwing all of this money at the result of the problem. You're not really putting the money toward the root of the problem. But again, if you don't see it as a problem, would you ever do that? But
Hmm.
because we've normalized certain things so much in our country, the money is going to the people who are damaged by what is happening and not looking at what they call in this writing the threat assessment. I would be interested to know how many dollars are going toward threat assessment programs versus the number of dollars going to the cleanup after this person has
Hmm.
done irreparable harm to people and caused trauma that they're going to have to live through for the rest of their life. Final
Well,
thoughts.
listen. Well, that's America. America is responsive and not, they don't believe in preventative stuff. They don't believe in preventative medical care. They don't believe in preventative anything. They just like to respond to stuff.
You
That's
got
it.
people.
They just want to respond.
The respond nation and not the prevention nation.
Hmm.
You have a solid point
No,
there.
China. Yeah, China. China is about preventative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting educated. They're getting taught trades and stuff like that in
In,
school,
in
in
kindergarten, yes, I
elementary
saw that.
school.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And they come on up. That's why they're so strong because they invest in their future. They invest in their youth. See,
Listen,
so that's why they're so strong.
you ain't
Us,
got to tell me.
it's,
I have Asian clients. I am treated like the queen I am when it comes to those
mm-hmm,
students and those parents. They value education and teachers.
yes,
And
yes,
on the other hand, I got to call whole school districts and report our children in a lot of cases who are taught to devalue teachers, and not just devalue teachers, but devalue Black teachers in particular, and not just devalue Black teachers
Mm-hmm.
in particular, but devalue Black women teachers. So I get day and night experiences depending on the clients that I'm working with right now. Same thing, let me shout out another country. Same thing with India. Indian
Mm-hmm.
parents don't play about their children learning, getting an education, and respecting the teacher in front of them. Okay? So I have been spoiled by my Korean and Japanese and Chinese parents and Indian parents. And then I got American parents that want to give me all kind of problems, and you can't figure it out, that your child needs to listen, follow directions, and respect the teaching that's happening in front of them. I'm just putting it out there.
Mm-hmm.
So say what you want to say about some of these other nations. Their level of respect for learning is off the charts when it comes to that. And unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
our culture in America does not value education and teaching the way that they need to. They just don't. We can see that in the salaries that teachers get. They don't value us. It's ridiculous. Okay? But understand,
Mm-hmm.
as it continues to be ridiculous, teachers are not going to keep returning to these spaces. They just aren't. They're not. You're going to see more and more teachers leave the classroom, and they're going to go global and remote. So just
Mm-hmm.
prepare your mind for it. And of course, with the dismantling of the Department of Education, which is happening in real time, you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more teachers go global and remote. Part of it is going to be because they're going to be forced to, because they're going to be out of a job. But the other part of it is that global and remote door being open opens the opportunity to serve more children, and to serve children who want to learn, and parents who
Mm-hmm.
want to invest in that learning. I got to go. Final thoughts. I know
Another
this is the
final
preacher.
thought.
This is the preacher's
Okay.
third close.
Yeah.
All right, we on close number 3.
Yeah.
Final thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to do better. And if the nation won't do better, we have to do better as a group. Educate our children. Take it upon ourselves. The black church used to teach youth. Let's return to that. The parents, the neighborhood. Let's
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
See, who? If they want to take away education, take stuff out of school. Let's take it upon ourselves to teach them.
And let's pay the teachers, please, because we're not doing all this for free. This
Yes.
is our profession.
Yes.
Just like you have a profession, this is our profession. So don't
Mm-hmm.
don't expect everything to be for free. Now, I volunteer a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my time. I give discounts when parents want to do a program, or they have more than one child. I do discounts, but don't ask me to give away everything for free. This is my time. This is
Mm-hmm.
my education. This is my experience. This is my expertise. Respect that. Honor that. Okay.
You
All
know,
right.
on that note, I got one more thing. Thank you for the information you gave me for my granddaughter. She's using it. She's getting A's. She's getting,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. 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 Wonderful. That's what I want to hear. Stephanie, our last comment we're going to take, she says, we have threat assessments in our district. Absolutely. All right. But I feel like if we're talking about prevention for some of this stuff, more investment needs to happen there. We can prevent a lot of the aftermath if we start investing where prevention
Mm-hmm.
is. Taking time out with those children, checking in with those children. This boy, this young man who did this shooting, somewhere along the line, people stopped checking in with him.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he was in those programs, I know people were checking in the programs, but somewhere along the line, somebody stopped checking in with him. And he got radicalized into something. And because he already had the training and the know how, it wasn't hard to escalate to the next step. All right.
Mm-hmm.
This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be
Light.
light. Take care, everyone. Be well, be safe this weekend, and be light. Take care.